I've been a lot of things in my life: a foreman, a handyman, a referee, a homework tutor, a chauffeur, a short order cook on Sunday mornings when everyone wanted something different. But standing in the back row of that gymnasium on a Tuesday afternoon in June, I realized I'd been one more thing the whole time and never quite named it: an ATM with a pulse, a wallet that remembered birthdays, the guy who paid the bills. That's not me being dramatic. That's almost a direct quote. Kyle adjusted the microphone at the podium, cleared his throat the way nervous kids do when they're trying to sound older than they are, and said it right out loud into the PA system, which echoed off the cinder block walls and the folded up bleachers, and the faces of about 800 people who all heard it perfectly clearly. He said he wanted to thank the man who actually gave them life, their real dad, not the guy who just paid the bills. The gymnasium went very quiet for a second, not silent, quiet. The way a room gets when something lands that nobody was expecting and everyone's trying to figure out if they heard it right. I heard it right. My name is Gary Pullman. I'm 54 years old. I work as a shift foreman at a plastics manufacturing plant outside of town. Been doing it for going on 22 years. I drive a used F-150. I drink black coffee and I watch baseball, and I fix things around the house because it's cheaper than calling someone. I am not a complicated man. I don't have a law degree or a tactical background or a financial empire hidden behind a shell company. What I have is a strong back, a decent work ethic, and 15 years of showing up for two kids who were not biologically mine. 15 years of scraped knees and dentist appointments and science fair projects and algebra homework I had to relearn right alongside them. 15 years of carpools and parent-teacher conferences and birthday cakes and Christmas mornings and hospital waiting rooms and driving lessons and empty parking lots on Sunday afternoons. 15 years of showing up every single time, whether anyone noticed or not. And on graduation day, in front of everyone we knew, my stepson Kyle stood at that microphone and let the whole room know exactly how much all of that was worth to him. Not the guy who just paid the bills. I was sitting in the back row because the seating was assigned alphabetically, and the twins' last name was Matthews, which put their family cluster near the front. I'd arrived early, found my spot, ironed my shirt that morning. The blue one, Rachel always said, looked good on me. I sat with my hands on my knees, and I watched Kyle deliver that line. And I watched his twin sister Megan nod along from her seat in the graduating class, nodding and smiling and bouncing that little tassel on her cap. And I watched her smile aimed at someone 3 rows ahead of me: Carl Briggs, the biological father. The man who had spent the better part of 15 years being spectacularly absent from his children's lives in every way that mattered, but who had shown up today in pressed khakis and a sport coat to collect the credit. Carl Briggs, who once pawned Megan's bicycle to cover a gambling debt, who missed 9 consecutive birthdays, who owed somewhere north of $40,000 in unpaid child support that he'd never once been held accountable for, because Rachel kept declining to pursue it. Carl Briggs, who sent a generic, proud of you text on graduation morning, and apparently that was enough to qualify as real. Rachel didn't turn around, didn't look back at me, didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't do a single thing that suggested she understood what had just happened or that she had any interest in acknowledging it. She sat there in her good dress with her hair done up, face locked into this frozen smile that was technically still a smile but had all the warmth of a headstone. I didn't stand up, didn't make a scene, didn't do anything dramatic or loud or visible. I just sat there while the applause filled the room and people looked around, and one woman in a blue hat leaned over to her husband and said something, and he squinted back at me like he was trying to place a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. I sat there and I felt something go very still inside me. Not broken, not shattered, not the explosion people always describe when they talk about a moment like this. More like a switch being thrown. Quiet, clean, final. The kind of still that settles in when you've made a decision and you don't need to announce it to anyone. I looked at Kyle up at that podium, grinning like he'd just delivered the funniest line of the evening. I looked at Megan, all lip gloss and ceremony. I looked past Rachel's profile. And then I stopped looking at any of them, and I found myself staring at a loose wire above the basketball hoop at the far end of the gym, just hanging there, swaying slightly in the air conditioning. I watched that wire for a long time. Not because I was trying to calm down, not because I was dissociating or checking out or falling apart, but because I understood, in that moment, with perfect clarity, that if I looked at Rachel's face right then, something in me would crack that I didn't want to crack in public, and I was going to need everything I had intact for what came next. After the ceremony, the crowd flooded toward the exits and the steps and the grassy areas outside where everyone took photos. Rachel gathered the twins and they posed together, arms around each other, caps and gowns, the whole picture. Carl stepped into the frame like it was the most natural thing in the world. Megan tossed him her graduation cap and said, "Wear it, Dad." And Carl caught it and put it on and laughed that big, obnoxious bark of a laugh he had. And Rachel laughed too. And the three of them stood there getting photographed by half a dozen phones while I stood 10 feet away holding a folded program. Nobody invited me into the photo. Nobody looked over. I was furniture. A lamp that had been plugged in for 15 years and was now apparently just part of the background. I didn't push my way in, didn't ask, didn't make it weird. I just watched. Eventually, Rachel drifted over to her sister, who'd materialized with a plastic wine cup from somewhere. And they were laughing about something, and I walked up and asked if she wanted help, taking down the banners and the congratulatory signs we'd put up along the railing. She looked at me with this expression like I was being slightly unreasonable about something she couldn't quite name. "Don't take it personally, Gary," she said. "They're just kids. Just kids." I nodded, said nothing. In my chest, something that had been smoldering for a long time stopped smoldering and went cold instead. Cold is different from hot. Hot burns itself out. Cold stays. That night I sat in the garage on the old fold-out chair by the workbench. The beer fridge hummed, the rafters creaked. I had the light on over the bench and I was just sitting there, elbows on my knees, looking at the boxes stacked along the back wall. Cardboard boxes labeled in black marker. Kyle, science fair. Megan, third grade. Christmas decor 2016. Each one a little monument to something I'd been there for. Kyle's Pinewood Derby car was in one of them. We'd made it together on a long February night with a busted Dremel and a YouTube tutorial. And it had come in third place. And he'd cried a little on the way home, and I'd taken him to Dairy Queen and told him third place meant you had 2 people to beat next year instead of 0. He'd laughed at that. He was 8 years old. Megan's papier-mâché volcano was in another box, bright pink, because she'd insisted and I hadn't argued. She'd built it over a week, and the night before the science fair it had partially collapsed, and we'd stayed up past midnight rebuilding it together at the kitchen table with flour paste and newspaper and the TV on low in the background. She'd gotten a B+. Kyle's old lunchbox sat on the shelf. Ninja Turtles on the side, faded from years of washing. He used to call it his battle pack. I'd cleaned peanut butter out of the corners of that thing more times than I could count. Funny what sticks. There was a framed photo on the pegboard above the bench, the 4 of us at Niagara Falls maybe 8 years ago. Rachel had insisted on matching shirts. Team Matthews, they said. I'd thought it was corny at the time. Now it just seemed like evidence. I sat there for a long time. The ache I felt wasn't sharp. It was the dull, deep, familiar kind. The kind that's been sitting in the same spot so long it knows its way around your chest without a map. And somewhere in the middle of it, one thought surfaced so clearly, it almost made me laugh out loud. They think the money's still waiting for them. They don't know yet that I was the money, and I'm not waiting anymore. Rachel was in the kitchen when I finally came inside, scraping leftover cake off a plastic plate with her thumbnail, not looking up. "You're being dramatic," she said before I'd even spoken. "It was just a moment. Don't make it into something it wasn't. Just a moment. 15 years, reduced to just a moment that I was supposed to absorb without comment and move on from by morning." I didn't answer her. I walked down the hallway to the bedroom, went to the closet, pushed past the blazers I never wore anymore, and reached up to the shelf where the safe sat. 6-digit combination. Click. Inside was a thick envelope. It had been building for 5 years. Tax returns, bonuses, overtime I never complained about. Every financial surplus I'd quietly redirected into this one fund. A college fund for Megan and Kyle. 2 checks, freshly printed, one for each of them. First semester tuition, housing deposits, books, a cushion, the whole thing. I held Megan's check in both hands. Thought about the little girl who used to climb into my lap with half a granola bar and say, "Daddy, can you read to me?" In that voice that was so small and so certain, I'd say yes. Then I folded the check carefully and put it back in the envelope, and returned the envelope to the safe and clicked it shut. I didn't slam anything, didn't make noise, just stood there in the dim closet for a minute with my hand on the safe door, thinking. People describe heartbreak like an explosion, a bomb going off, everything scattered, fire everywhere. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was like a glacier, massive, slow, permanent. The kind of thing that reshapes the whole landscape without making a sound you can hear. I went back to the party. The house smelled like rotisserie chicken and sangria. Carl had taken up a position at the kitchen island like a talk show host. Shirt too tight, gold chain catching the recessed lighting, holding court with a story that was clearly funnier to him than to anyone else. Rachel stood next to him with her wine glass raised, doing that high-pitched laugh she used to save for our anniversary dinners. The twins were on the back deck with their friends, posing for pictures in front of the banner I'd hung up that morning. Congrats, Megan and Kyle, class of 2025. I'd bought that banner, hung it myself with a step stool and a level. I stood near the bookshelf in the corner of the living room, the shelf that used to have our wedding photos on it. Those had been replaced at some point with decorative candles and a farmhouse-style sign that said, "This is us." I'd never asked when that happened or where the photos went. Rachel didn't speak to me directly for most of the evening. She floated around the party, touching Carl's arm with a frequency that was hard to miss if you were paying attention. Kyle walked past me twice, without acknowledging I existed. The second time, I was standing right next to the folding table where the gift cards and envelopes were laid out, and I watched him walk by close enough to brush my shoulder without so much as a glance. I had put 2 envelopes in that pile, simple white ones, clean handwriting, one for each of them. Kyle opened his about 20 minutes later, out on the deck. I watched through the glass. He pulled out the card, read whatever I'd written, looked at the check inside, and shrugged. "Thanks," he said to nobody in particular, and dropped the envelope on top of a stack of napkins next to someone's half-eaten cupcake. Megan didn't open hers at all, as far as I could tell. It sat in the pile all evening. I'm not sure she even registered it was from me. And that was the moment. Not the speech, not the photo, not Rachel's comment about just kids. That was the moment everything crystallized. Because what I felt standing there watching Kyle shrug at 15 years of effort, folded into a white envelope, wasn't anger. It was something cleaner than that. It was freedom. The specific, weightless freedom that arrives when you finally understand that nobody expects anything from you anymore. Not respect, not acknowledgement, not presence. Because they've already written you out of the story entirely. They'd erased me. And that meant I could move however I wanted without anyone watching. I went back inside, walked down the hallway past Rachel and Carl clinking glasses, past the half-deflated graduation balloons, into the bedroom. Opened the closet. Reached for the safe. 6 digits. Click. This time, I didn't just look. I took everything. Every check, every savings bond, the final bonus deposit I'd added 3 weeks prior, all of it went into my briefcase. Then I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and transferred every cent into a private account at a different bank entirely, one no one in this house had ever heard of. I set up new passwords, new security alerts, 2-factor authentication on everything. Then I closed the laptop, put the briefcase in my truck, and went back to the party. Rachel was in the backyard laughing at something Carl was showing everyone on his phone. Megan was sitting on the edge of the hot tub with her friends, legs dangling, not looking up. Kyle was somewhere inside. I got myself a glass of water from the kitchen and stood there for a few minutes watching through the sliding glass door. They had no idea. Not even a flicker. They were absolutely certain the world was going to keep working the way it always had. That certainty was the most expensive thing they owned, and they'd just lost it. I called in a personal day the next morning. My supervisor, Mike, picked up on the second ring, and when I told him I needed the day, he just said, "Take what you need, man," in that even, no questions asked way he has. And I thanked him and hung up and sat with that for a second longer than I expected to. Sometimes a small kindness hits harder than it should. I ironed a clean shirt, put on the decent khakis, drove across town to the brick office building on the far side of Maine, the one with the perpetually clean windows, and the receptionist, who always seems genuinely pleased to see you. I wasn't there to explore options. I had a list, names, numbers, intentions, and I moved through them methodically. First stop was the lawyer. His name was Don Greer, mid-60s, the kind of man who looked like he spent his weekends reading case law for fun and had never lost an argument he cared about. He glanced at the envelope I slid across his desk, then looked up at me over his glasses. "You're serious about this?" I was serious, I said, the moment they stood at a microphone and thanked a man who never bought a single notebook. He nodded once, didn't ask for elaboration. Just pulled out a yellow legal pad and got to work. We set up a trust. Not for Megan, not for Kyle, for Sarah. Sarah Kowalski was Rachel's niece, her older brother Dennis's kid. She was 20 years old and worked the closing shift at the grocery store 3 nights a week and cleaned office buildings on weekends. And she had wanted to be a veterinarian since she was about 12 years old, but college had never been a real possibility for her. Her dad had left when she was 15. Her mom had gotten sick not long after, and the gap between where she was and where she wanted to be had been widening steadily ever since. Rachel had never had much use for Sarah. Said she was too quiet, too serious, didn't fit in with the family energy. What Rachel meant was that Sarah didn't flatter her, didn't play along, didn't perform the role of adoring niece at brunches and holiday parties. Sarah was just honest. She showed up, she helped, she said what she meant, and she didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. The last time I'd seen her was Christmas Eve, a couple of years back. She'd brought a tin of cookies she'd made herself and spent half the evening in the kitchen helping wash dishes, while Kyle sat in the recliner playing video games and Megan and Rachel held court in the living room. At the end of the night, when I was loading things into the car, Sarah was the only person who came outside and asked if I needed a hand. I'd thought about that a lot since. I called her that afternoon. She picked up on the third ring, slightly out of breath. "Sorry, I'm on break," she said. "Everything okay?" "Depends," I said. "You still want to go to college?" A short pause. Then she laughed, the polite laugh you give when you think someone might be joking, but you're not sure. "I'm not joking," I said. Silence. Longer this time. "Gary, seriously? I can't promise everything," I said, "but I can get you started. Tuition, books, housing, a cushion to land on. You've earned it." "Why me?" she asked, and her voice had gone very quiet. "Because you never asked," I said, and that's exactly why. She didn't cry, not then. Just sat with it for a moment, and I could hear the break room noise in the background, the hum of a vending machine, someone's radio. Then she said, "Okay," and it was the most sincere okay I'd heard in a long time. That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor and moved everything officially. The trust was set up clean, no connection to the Matthews household, no paper trail Rachel could find without a court order, and a very good attorney. Everything labeled under the trust's name, everything documented, everything legal. Meanwhile, back at the house, the planning continued without interruption. I saw a family group text on the kitchen iPad one evening when I passed through, Megan sending photos of dorm rooms, Kyle bragging about his gaming setup, Rachel discussing which wine glasses to donate now that she'd have her space back. They were mapping out move-in dates, debating what color sheets to buy, arguing about who got to keep the good throw blanket. Rachel made a joke about converting Megan's room into a yoga studio. Nobody asked about the balance. Nobody checked the account. Why would they? They'd been living inside a system that always worked, and they had no reason to believe it would ever stop. The money was just there, the way water is just there when you turn on the tap. You don't think about where it comes from until the pipes run dry. So while they measured for curtain rods and poured Saturday morning mimosas and planned a future they assumed was already funded, I was quietly, methodically, and completely legally rewriting every single line of that story. They just didn't know it yet. Rachel was in the kitchen when the first email came through. Her laptop made that cheerful little ping it always made for new messages, the sound she associated with online shopping confirmations and recipe newsletters. She glanced at it, expecting nothing, and found instead a politely worded notice from the admissions office at Hudson State University. Subject: Deposit not received. Action required. She read it once, read it again. Her face did this slow fold, like a map that's been opened too many times and finally starts to lose its creases. She hit reply, stopped, changed her mind, and picked up her phone instead. I was on lunch break sitting in the cab of my truck outside a deli on Route 9, halfway through a turkey sandwich, when the screen lit up. Rachel, home. I let it ring twice. Then I picked up. You didn't send the deposit. No hello, no preamble. Hudson, the dorm payments, Kyle's housing. They're saying it bounced, or didn't go through or something. I took a slow bite of my sandwich, chewed, swallowed. Oh, I said, oh, that's it? I'll look into it. Look into it? Gary, this is the dorm deposit. This is Kyle's housing. You said, probably a glitch. I said, I'll look into it. A pause. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking through the phone. Then her voice shifted just slightly into the softer register she used when she was recalibrating. Gary, are you okay? Never better, I said, and I hung up. That night, Megan was at the kitchen table, pretending to do homework, but clearly listening to Rachel make a second round of calls. She caught enough of it to sit up straighter. Later, while they were folding laundry together, she asked, Is the money actually not there? Rachel waved her off with the practiced ease of someone who'd been managing inconvenient truths for years. It's probably just a mix-up. You know how your dad overthinks things. He gets in his head. Stepdad, Megan said. It was reflexive, not even mean, just automatic. Kyle was on the couch with his phone, not looking up. He's not going to do anything, he said. He's too soft. Remember when he cried at Finding Nemo, like actually cried? Megan laughed a little, but it came out uncertain. Kyle's always been the loud one, the one who fills the room with confidence he hasn't actually earned yet. The kind of kid who mistakes being given things for deserving them. That night, Rachel sent me a text. Brunch Sunday, just us. We need to talk. Then a red heart emoji, which was either a peace offering or a lure. And with Rachel, those two things had always been difficult to distinguish. I stared at it for a while. Just us. That was Rachel's language for, I want to control the environment. She was always at her most effective in a public place over food, somewhere warm and comfortable, where raising your voice felt socially unacceptable, and the right atmosphere could soften almost anything. She'd been doing it for years. A difficult conversation became manageable if you were holding a mimosa and the table had fresh flowers on it. I typed back, sure, looking forward to it. Which was true. I was genuinely looking forward to it. There's a particular satisfaction in watching someone build a trap they're certain you'll walk into. Watching them measure and set and bait the whole thing with real care, all while you're standing on the other side of the room with absolutely no intention of going anywhere near it. Rachel was a gifted emotional strategist. The problem was she'd spent 15 years assuming I was the audience, not a player. The brunch place she picked was one of those farmhouse aesthetic bistros that serves eggs on wooden boards and acts like ketchup is a character flaw. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a chalkboard menu that changed weekly. She'd chosen well. The whole place was designed to make you feel like everything was going to be fine.
Still got it. And she thinks so too. If you want to meet active women our age, get on singletune.com. It's a game changer.
She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table in white linen with her sunglasses pushed up on her head. She stood when she saw me, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek like we'd just run into each other at a farmer's market. Hi, stranger, she said, smiling. I sat down, ordered black coffee, no food. Rachel ordered something with hollandaise and a mimosa and started stirring the drink slowly, the way people do when they're composing their opening line. That email from Hudson really threw me, she said. I thought maybe there was a miscommunication somewhere about the timeline or the account or, I said. She paused, looked at me. You always used to be so organized with all of that. Remember that year you handled our taxes when I was a complete disaster? You had everything color-coded. She laughed softly and reached across the table to touch my hand. You always came through. There it was, the nostalgia play. She was very good at this. Winding the clock backward, reminding you of every good moment, building a case for why the past justified the present. She kept going. When Kyle had that asthma attack in second grade, and we were at the hospital until 2 in the morning, you stayed in that awful plastic chair the whole night. You never complained once. She paused. They don't remember that, but I do. I nodded, sipped my coffee. And when Megan lost her math binder the night before finals, you drove to 3 different stores. She smiled. 3, Gary. Lot of binders, I said. She leaned forward slightly. Her voice went quieter, more deliberate. I know the graduation speech stung. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. But kids that age, they don't understand the weight of their words. They're living in the moment. They're not thinking about, and you? I said. She blinked. What? Do you understand the weight? A small hesitation. She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when she was recalibrating. I just want us to be okay, Gary. I want the kids to have their future. You know how Kyle is. He's loud, he says stupid things, but his heart is in the right place. He doesn't mean half of what he... Sure, I said. She exhaled, visibly relieved. So we're okay? You'll take care of the deposit? I set my coffee cup down carefully. Of course, I said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I knew I could count on you. She smiled, warm and certain, and for a moment she looked exactly like the woman I'd married, and I felt the old pull of it, the familiar gravity, and then it passed. I smiled back. It was almost a nice moment. Almost. I met Sarah the next afternoon at the back entrance of the community center, where she worked part-time. She was still in her work polo, hair in a ponytail, cheeks flushed from scrubbing floors. She looked tired the way people look tired when they've been tired for a long time and have mostly stopped noticing it. I handed her the envelope. Thick, heavy, full of documentation. Confirmation numbers, account information, a prepaid account in her name, the trust paperwork, all of it. She opened it and went very still. Gary, she said, I can't. I held up a hand. You don't have to say anything. Just do something good with it. She looked down at the note I'd tucked on top of the paperwork. A single index card. Because someone should know what effort looks like. When she looked up, her eyes were bright. Not the performative bright of someone who knows they're being watched. The real kind. The kind that happens when something unexpected and entirely undeserved lands in front of you and you don't have the defenses ready. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because you asked if I needed help carrying boxes, I said. And that was enough. She laughed at that, a short surprised laugh, and then pressed her hand over her mouth and looked away for a second to get herself together. Across town, around the same time, Kyle posted a photo on Instagram. Him and Carl at the backyard grill, both holding beer cans. Carl with one arm thrown around Kyle's shoulders. Caption, big thanks to the man who made it all happen. Family Tatshire blessed. Carl commented a fire emoji. Rachel liked it within 3 minutes. No mention of me. Not even the polite fiction of an acknowledgement. Just nothing. A clean erasure. Like I'd never been part of the equation at all. That was fine. I'd already moved the equation. Orientation week was supposed to be the victory lap. Megan had ordered sage green bedding and spent 2 evenings planning which wall would get the string lights. Kyle had packed 3 duffel bags with the focused intensity of someone deploying to a remote location. PS5, dual monitors, a pair of sneakers with the tags still on that he'd been saving for the occasion. They'd both posted photos that morning, caps and sunglasses, big smiles, Rachel behind the camera. Megan captioned hers onto bigger things. Kyle went with a flexed arm emoji and a pair of sunglasses. Carl commented, "Proud of you, son," on Kyle's post. Rachel left a string of red hearts. I didn't get an invite to come along for the drop-off. That was fine. I had somewhere else to be, my own front porch, with hot coffee and the bird feeder I'd been meaning to refill for 2 weeks. I took the day off, not for them, for myself, because I knew exactly what was coming and I wanted to be somewhere comfortable when it arrived. The first tremor hit at around 2:30 in the afternoon. Rachel called. I watched the phone light up and let it go to voicemail. 3 minutes later, a text. "What the hell's going on? Call me now." I finished my coffee. At 3:04, Megan texted me. Megan, who hadn't sent me a single message in over 2 months. They're saying tuition wasn't paid. I'm literally standing in the orientation line. This is so humiliating. I took my time with the reply. When I finally sent it, it was 3 words. Talk to your mom. By 4:10, the main event arrived in person. Rachel knocked on my door with the focused energy of someone who had spent 90 minutes getting angrier in a car. I opened it calmly, stepped aside, let her in. She walked straight into the kitchen, turned around, and looked at me with her jaw set and her eyes wide. "The tuition never went through," she said. Megan was crying in the hallway. Kyle couldn't even get his student ID. They were turned away at check-in, Gary. Check-in. "Tough day," I said. "What did you do?" "Me?" I walked to the kitchen counter, opened the drawer, pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it across to her. A withdrawal slip. The college fund account. Full balance, removed in full, dated the day after graduation. She stared at it, picked it up, read it again like the numbers might change. "You can't be serious," she said. It came out almost as a whisper. "You all made it pretty clear," I said, leaning back against the counter with my arms crossed. "You wanted the real dad to get the credit. The speeches, the photos, the graduation cap, all of it." So, I stepped back. I let him have the moment. I paused. But the money was mine. My overtime, my taxes, my name on the account. Every penny documented. Nothing illegal, just inconvenient. Her mouth opened, closed. She was trembling now. Not the dramatic trembling of someone performing distress, but the real kind. The kind that happens when a reality you were absolutely certain about suddenly turns out to be wrong. "We'll take you to court," she said, and her voice had gone flat and hard. "You won't," I said, "because there's nothing to take. It was my money in my account, and I moved it, legally, to a trust that has nothing to do with this household. You can call a lawyer if you want. They'll tell you the same thing." She was still staring at the withdrawal slip when a car pulled up outside. Kyle and Megan, back from Hudson. They didn't wait for the car to fully stop before they were out and coming through the door. Kyle came in first, face red, voice already at full volume. "What the hell, Gary? They wouldn't even let me into the building. I don't have a student ID. I don't have a dorm key. I don't have anything." I turned to look at him. "Sounds like something to take up with your real dad," I said. Megan came in behind him, eyes red from crying. "Why would you do this? Why would you do this to us?" "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I stopped doing things for you. There's a difference." "After the speech?" she said. "Is this about the speech?" "It was one stupid moment." "You said what you meant," I said. "You said it in front of 800 people. I'm just taking it seriously." The room went quiet. Not the awkward quiet of an argument that's paused. The deeper quiet of something that's actually landed. Megan looked at her mother. Rachel was sitting on the edge of the couch now, face buried in her hands. Kyle stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking like someone had pulled a load-bearing wall out from under his entire worldview. "What are we supposed to do?" Rachel said from behind her hands. I walked to the door and held it open. "Figure it out," I said. And for the first time in 15 years, I watched them look at each other and realize they had absolutely no idea how. The invitation came through the family group chat about 3 weeks later. Matthew's family barbecue. Sunday at Aunt Linda's. Bring a side dish. The usual summer gathering, lawn chairs and paper plates, and those potato salads that all taste vaguely of obligation. I almost didn't go. Then I thought about it for a while and decided I'd regret not going more than I'd regret going. I arrived early, sat near the edge of the yard with a glass of iced tea. Aunt Linda waved from the grill. "Gary, haven't seen you since Easter. Glad you made it." Been around, I said, and left it at that. By 3 o'clock, the backyard was full. Kids running through the sprinkler, uncles arguing about baseball, the usual chaos. Carl was there in a backwards baseball cap, already working on his second beer, doing his best impression of a man who'd been present all along. He was trying to bond with Kyle and Megan in the easy, casual way of someone who's never had to do the hard work, and therefore has no idea what the hard work looks like. Rachel arrived about 30 minutes late in a bright yellow sundress. She made the rounds, hugs, air kisses, the high laugh, but something was off. The performance had a wobble in it that hadn't been there before. It started when Uncle Dave asked Kyle how college was going. Kyle froze, looked at Rachel. Rachel laughed a little too loudly and said they were working through some administrative hiccups. Then, Megan's cousin asked if she'd picked her major yet. That's when the wobble became a crack. Rachel turned to face the yard, and her voice came out louder than she'd intended. We would have picked majors already if someone hadn't pulled the rug out from under everything we'd been planning for years. The yard went quiet. Even the grill seemed to hiss and settle. Aunt Linda looked up from the burgers. Rachel. Rachel's eyes found me across the yard like a heat-seeking missile locking on. He took it, she said, and her voice had gone hard and public. The college fund, all of it. Just emptied it. The day after graduation. After everything this family did for him. After 15 years. After everything this family did for him, Aunt Linda repeated slowly, in a tone that was not agreement. Every fork and drink paused mid-motion. Carl said, "Wait, what's she talking about?" Which was a fascinating question from a man who owed $40,000 in child support. Rachel took 2 steps toward the center of the yard like she was claiming a stage. He withdrew every cent, without telling anyone, after we spent 15 years treating him like part of this family. I lifted my glass in a small, quiet acknowledgement. The silence stretched. People shifted. Eyes moved. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. "Rachel," she said, "weren't you the one who posted that video from graduation? The one where they thanked Carl?" Rachel blinked. "That was their idea. I watched it," someone else said. "Sounded like you were clapping." Rachel's face went red. "I wasn't trying to. This isn't about that. This is about him blindsiding us with—" "No blindsiding," I said from my chair, calm and even. "I just stopped paying the bills, like I was told to." Kyle, across the yard, face red, finally spoke. "We didn't mean it that way. It was graduation. It was the moment. Everyone was emotional. You said what you said," I told him, into a microphone. More silence. Then murmurs, the low kind that move around a crowd and don't need to be spoken loudly to be heard. Cousin Brittany leaned over to whisper something to her boyfriend. Uncle Dave shook his head slowly, the way he did when something confirmed a suspicion he'd had for a while. Carl was studying the ground with sudden, intense interest. Rachel looked around the circle of relatives and found no one rushing to her side. People were very focused on their deviled eggs and their plastic cups. The judgment in the yard was quieter than any argument and 10 times louder. "You're embarrassing me," she said, turning back to me. I looked at her. "I'm sitting in a lawn chair drinking iced tea," I said. "I haven't raised my voice once." She stood there in the middle of the yard, with her plastic cup and her yellow sundress, and the full weight of a narrative that had just stopped working. And for the first time I could remember, she had nothing to say. I finished my tea, stood up, nodded to Aunt Linda. "Thanks for having me," I said. "Always good to see you." And I walked out of the yard, past the grill and the sprinkler and the folding tables, and got in my truck and drove away. Turns out, loyalty doesn't follow bloodlines. It follows the truth. It was Sarah's mom who posted it. She still used a phone from 2013 and typed with 2 fingers and had no idea how to use hashtags. But what she wrote hit harder than any polished caption could have. A grainy photo of Sarah standing in her new dorm room, holding a cardboard box full of textbooks, smiling the specific smile of someone who can't quite believe where they're standing. My daughter just got a second chance. Not because of luck, not because someone had to, because someone chose to. Thank you, Gary. You didn't owe her anything, but you gave her everything. The post went small-town viral. Not celebrity viral, not algorithm viral. The other kind, the kind that spreads because people actually know the people in it. Hundreds of shares, comments from teachers, neighbors, old church friends, people I hadn't seen in years. That's real fatherhood right there. I remember Gary at every single band recital those kids had. This doesn't surprise me one bit. Sarah deserves this more than anyone I know. Rachel saw it. I know she saw it because she called me the next morning at 7:45 before I'd even gotten to work. I didn't answer. She showed up at the plant instead. I was on break in the loading bay, leaning against the wall with a gas station coffee, when I saw her car pull in wrong way through the exit lane. She got out like she was in a hurry and had forgotten how to walk at the same time. Her makeup was half done. Her eyes were red. She was wearing a blazer over pajama pants, which told me a lot about how the morning had gone. "Gary," she called, already walking toward me. "Please, can we just, please?" I took a sip of my coffee, kept walking toward the side entrance. "Gary, wait." She was following me now. "Just a minute. Just talk to me for 1 minute." I didn't stop. "They're your kids too," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. "We made a mistake. I know we did. I know it. But they're still—" I stopped walking, turned around slowly and looked at her. "We," I said. She blinked. "You said we made a mistake," I said. "Just want to make sure I understand what we means." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I held her gaze for a moment, not with anger, not with contempt, just with the plain, clear-eyed look of someone who has finally stopped hoping the other person will say the right thing. And then I badged through the side door and let it close quietly between us. Through the glass, I watched her stand there in the parking lot for a moment. Then she sat down on the curb, which I hadn't expected, and put her face in her hands. I went back to work. That night, I got home around 8:15. My apartment building's hallway light was flickering the way it always did, and I was thinking about calling the super again when I stepped off the elevator and found Rachel on her knees in front of my door. Her purse had spilled. Keys, receipts, a tube of lip balm, a small orange prescription bottle rolling slow circles on the tile. She wasn't crying anymore. She was past crying. This was the thing that comes after crying, the raw, gutted animal version of it. She looked up at me. "Gary," she whispered, "please look at me. Please, I'll fix it. I'll make them apologize. I'll make them understand what they did. Just please don't walk away from this. From us." A door opened at the end of the hall. Someone looked out, then slowly pulled it shut. Another neighbor cracked their door an inch and then thought better of it. This was no longer a private moment. It had an audience now, and Rachel had always known how to use an audience. I stood there and looked at her, really looked at her. Not at the performance, but at the person underneath it, the person I'd spent 15 years trying to build something real with. And I felt not anger, not satisfaction, not the vindictive thrill you might expect. Just a deep, settled quiet. The kind that comes when you've already made your peace with something and you're just watching the last of it play out. I stepped past her carefully, unlocked the door, paused with my hand on the frame, and looked back at her one last time. "I'm not angry," I said. "I want you to know that. I'm just done." And I went inside. No slam, no final speech. Just the soft click of the latch and the sound of someone on the other side of the door finally understanding that there was no other side of the door anymore. Around that time, my buddy Pete from the plant mentioned something that stuck with me. We were sitting in the break room one afternoon, and he was telling me about his divorce, which had been finalized 6 months prior, and how he'd spent the first few months after just rattling around his apartment like a marble in a shoebox. Then he said his sister had gotten him to try something called singletune.com. "It's not like regular dating stuff," he said, setting down his coffee. "Before you even see a single profile, they put you through this whole values assessment. Not personality quiz garbage like actual questions. What you've been through, what you believe, what you actually want from your life. Not just what sounds good to say." He shrugged. "I figured it would be cheesy, but I sat down with those questions and I was up until 2 in the morning. Because some of them, I don't know, man. Some of them made me think about things I hadn't thought about in years. I didn't say much, just listened. Anyway," he said, "just something to think about. When you're ready, I filed it away and didn't think about it much for a while. The bank appointment was on a Thursday morning, cool and overcast, the kind of day that felt like a clean page. The branch was one of the newer ones, soft music, thick carpet, kind of place designed to make every transaction feel like a reasonable decision. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in one of the waiting chairs with her hands folded in her lap, tapping one thumb against the other. She'd straightened her hair and put on a blazer that still had the store tag tucked discreetly into the inner seam. Probably thrift store. Probably cost her a couple of lunch shifts. She stood when she saw me. "Hi," she said, like she was still slightly surprised I'd actually shown up. "Hi," I said. The teller called us over after a few minutes, went through the paperwork, explained the final release of funds, and slid a folder across the counter for signature. I passed it to Sarah. She looked at me. That look again, waiting for the catch, the condition, the asterisk. "There's no trap," I said. "You earned this." She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking slightly. She signed. The teller smiled at both of us. "Lucky girl." I shook my head. Just someone who never forgot, who was actually there. We walked out into the afternoon, the light going golden and long across the parking lot. Sarah stopped on the sidewalk and hugged me. Not the polite kind, the real kind. Both arms, no words. The kind you only give once in your life to someone who changed the direction of it. Then she got into her rideshare and was gone. Off to campus. Off to a future that nobody handed her, but that she'd been running toward since she was 12 years old, and someone had finally opened the gate. I sat in my truck for a while before starting it. Just sat there with the window down and the engine off, listening to the parking lot. I thought about Pete's comment about singletune.com, about those questions that had kept him up until 2 in the morning. I'd been turning it over in the back of my mind for a few weeks, and sitting there in the parking lot after watching Sarah sign her name on a future she'd earned, it landed differently than it had in the break room. The idea of being asked what you actually believe, what you've actually been through, what you actually want. Not what you're supposed to say, but the real answers. The ones you haven't said out loud to anyone in a long time. I thought maybe I was finally ready to sit down with those questions. I drove out of town on the way home, taking the long route without quite deciding to. The old neighborhood, the house. It hadn't changed much from the outside. Same brick, same cracked section of driveway I'd been meaning to seal for 3 years. But there was a white for sale sign out front now, wobbling slightly in the breeze, and the garage door was open. And inside, I could see stacks of cardboard boxes. Megan was dragging a suitcase across the lawn. Kyle was carrying a flat-screen TV under one arm, like a wounded soldier, squinting in the afternoon light. Both of them moving with their heads down, not looking up, not looking around. Rachel was on the porch, sitting in the plastic lawn chair with her ankles crossed and her sunglasses on. Even though the sun had mostly gone behind the trees, she saw me. I could tell by the way she went still. I didn't slow down, didn't roll the window down, didn't wave, didn't say anything with my face. I just drove past the house where I'd made lunches and fixed leaks, and stayed up late doing homework, and cleaned peanut butter out of a Ninja Turtles lunchbox, and rebuilt a papier-mâché volcano at midnight, and drove to 3 different stores looking for a math binder, and sat in a plastic hospital chair until 2 in the morning and hung a graduation banner. On the morning of the day they told a room full of people, I was just the guy who paid the bills. Past all of it, past the people who called someone else real, past the version of myself who believed that love given without conditions would always find its way back. It doesn't always come back, but sometimes it goes somewhere better. And in my rearview mirror, there was nothing worth looking at.